Welcome to the second part of this lesson. I'm showing you the goal again of this lesson. After this lesson, you should be able to use the vocabulary in your speech aid, charity, debt relief, fair trade, grant, protectionism, and subsidy. This is the second part of this video, so first watch the first part first, and if you have watched the first part, then just continue. We talked about aid. Aid, remember, that's a form of assistance for developing countries to help them improve their situation. And it can be related to all kind of things, from women's rights to water projects, to help farmers get higher yield. And yes, and there's charity. Charity is money you collect for a good cause, like helping poor people in Africa. Okay, we talked about a lot of things. Let me quickly skip. We've talked about Christina Aguilera, yes, and here we are. Protectionism. Protectionism. First of all, there is this idea that free trade is good for everybody. That, but the question is there really free trade in this world? Well, I'm going to show you a video about this. Wait, no, let's begin with protectionism first. You know LEGO? Do you know LEGO? Let's quickly have a look. LEGO. Yes. Do you like LEGO? All kind of things, you can buy, and I can tell you, if you buy LEGO in Nicaragua, it costs 30% more than in the Netherlands in Europe. Why? Because Nicaragua adds a tariff for imports. So this box of LEGO arrives in Nicaragua, and the government wants 30% of tax, of tariff, of tariffs for that. That means that in the end, let me quickly have a look. In the end, okay, so the LEGO box enters Nicaragua, a tariff of 30%. The government benefits, yes, but what about the consumers? And what about the sellers of LEGO in Nicaragua? Think a moment. What are there advantages or disadvantages for each of this group, or maybe one has a disadvantage and disadvantage? Pause, please, and think about this. Okay, it's very clear that the consumers, they suffer because of this, because the price is high, so they have to pay more for LEGO. So it's not good for consumers. The sellers of LEGO, they will sell some LEGO, but if if the price were lower, they would sell much more, and they would make much more profit, because this 30%, only the government benefits of that. So if there wouldn't be 30% here, consumers would get a lower price, sellers could sell more LEGO in Nicaragua, and also, of course, they will still receive taxes, the government. In that way, why? So this tariff barrier of 30%, why do they do that? Well, first of all, because the government makes money that way. Money for the government. A reason could be to protect the local industry. For instance, if Nicaragua had a Lego industry that produces Lego or something similar, and they may not be able to compete with the big companies, and that's why in this way, with this tariff, the price gets higher, so it will be much more easier for Nicaraguan companies to compete. However, there are no Nicaraguan companies who produce Lego, so in this case it doesn't make sense. But you, you could call it protectionism to protect your own industry with a tariff barrier. Now, we are so what I'm trying to say is this tariff barrier is actually bad for the development of developing countries. But it goes two ways. One for a producer in Nicaragua that wants to export to the USA. The USA has tariff barriers. He will suffer because of those tariff barriers, because of protectionism. But also, if someone wants to import products, because then the consumers or companies who need those products, who want to sell those products, will have to pay more. We're gonna watch a video about this because it may be difficult. I understand. Here we go. I hope you like it.
We can now talk about protectionism. Consider this. We all know that sanctions are used to harm a country. However, many people for different reasons consider trade tariffs and restrictions, that is, imposing trade sanctions on ourselves, to be a positive thing. We will stimulate domestic demand, they say. Is this the right thinking? Let us go back to an example from a previous video. There are two countries. One is up far north, and the other is down far south. Suppose that there is no contact between them. The northerners are superb producers of spruce planks, but they want oranges as well. This is why some individuals bore huge costs to build greenhouses, thus creating just the right conditions for growing oranges. The southern country has an abundance of oranges, and they grow everywhere without any need to create special conditions for them. At some point, these two countries establish trade relations. The northern market is suddenly flooded with cheap oranges. Southern oranges, even after paying for transportation, are half as cheap and much tastier than the sour northern ones grown in greenhouses. You may think that access to cheaper oranges would benefit everyone. Well, almost everyone. Most northern orange producers will be most unhappy.
Okay, my question to you is, why do you think those northern orange producers will be unhappy? Think about for a minute and pause.
Some of them will try to push for tariffs in an effort to protect domestic producers. One of them will say that 500 people employed in his company will suddenly lose their jobs. Another will argue that southern competition is unfair because southerners have more sun than northerners. Were orange producers to succeed in pushing through tariffs on southern oranges, they would gain, but all other people, including domestic consumers, would lose. After all, the only reason for importing southern oranges is that it is more profitable to grow them there. Introducing tariffs means that all consumers are subsidizing less efficient domestic producers by spending more on oranges than anything else. Moreover, human capital, i.e., the employees of the orange companies, is frozen in this ineffective activity, thus hindering the...
Alright, we're gonna stop here. I hope you understand why free trade is good. At the same time, the disadvantages of free trade is that multinationals win and local industry may suffer. But then again, for Lego that's not a problem, but for other types of industry it can be a problem. So in fact the problem is actually that if a producer produces cotton and he wants to make a t-shirt of it and he wants to export that t-shirt to Europe where he gets a good price for it, then Europe will have a tariff barrier, and so he needs to pay like 20% or something on top of his price, and then it can be sold. So that means that's a form of protectionism. Europe is protecting its own market from foreign imports. So yes, I hope this is clear. You can ask me questions during the lesson about this. I understand this may be difficult. Okay, we continue. Let's continue. Yes. Subsidies. All right. Well, let's go back to the video because I think it was a good example here.
After paying for transportation.
Okay. So, these are the orange farmers in Africa. They want to sell their oranges to the north. But these northern producers here in a northern country, they receive subsidies. That means an amount of money. Wait, here we have it. Definition of it. Money that a government gives. Wait, to farmers to help them stay in business. For instance, it can be because of the landscape or something. But you can ask yourself, is that fair? What will these farmers think about those farmers receiving subsidies? They are not receiving subsidies, farmers in Africa, but farmers in the USA, farmers in France, they are receiving subsidies. Is that fair? I don't think so. Because that means that it's harder for them to sell their products to Europe or to the USA. This is especially true for cotton. So, yes, so subsidies for Western farmers. So from the USA, Europe. Okay. So what do you think? Subsidies and fair trade. Do these two go together, or do you see a contradiction there? Because of course, wait, let me put it this way. So, on one hand, Europe and the USA try to help developing countries. How? Through aid and charity. And on the other hand, they make it hard to trade with them in the form of protectionism and subsidies. And this is very contradictory, right? So on one hand they help, on the other hand they make it difficult for developing countries. Because what would you prefer, trade or aid? As a developing country, please think about this for a minute and pause, please. Think about this. What would you prefer, to receive aid or trade? I think it's important to trade, be able to trade with wealthy countries, and in that way to stimulate the economy. And aid is a small part, a small amount of money related compared to aid. Yes. Okay, let's see here. Well, this is a small case. Think about this for a moment, okay? This means that it's harder for you to produce coffee. I think cotton or cacao would be a better example here, because I don't think there are coffee farmers in the USA. But let's continue. So subsidies. Subsidies are amount of money a farmer receives for every pound he produces, or every liter he produces. So it means that governments help farmers by giving subsidies. Fair trade. Do you know what fair trade is? Maybe you know already what fair trade is. Okay. In Western societies, right now, people don't only want to know what kind of coffee am I drinking, they are also interested in, hey, under which circumstances has this coffee been produced? And has there been child labor? Did the farmer get a fair price for the coffee? Things like that. So Western consumers are they are willing to pay a little bit more for their coffee if they are assured that the farmer gets a fair price, a fairer price for it. It's still a low price, but better than a normal price, and that it has been produced without child labor and also under ecological circumstances, some good circumstances. Um, because the problem also is that the price in the supermarket, the producer who actually produces the coffee, who works day and night sometimes to produce the best coffee he can, he will only receive a little bit of that amount. The most of the profits are made by supermarkets, by roasters, US companies that roast the coffee. And so fair trade tries to give a, a little bit of a higher price to producers, higher than a normal price, so they can make a better living. The definition of the book is a movement that promotes fairer trade conditions for farmers in developing countries. Yes. Okay. I have traveled to Miraflor near Esteli in Nicaragua. This is what it looks like. I've investigated coffee, fair trade coffee, and organic coffee. This is what a coffee field looks like, and he is picking coffee. He's getting, of course, he's getting money to pay coffee to pick coffee, and people are able to make just a little bit more money because of fair trade. Of course, they have to adhere to certain standards related to child labor, related to protecting the environment. But this fair trade makes a small difference. I don't want to exaggerate it in their lives. And I've been there and I had a great time and I met a lot of great people there. And I have picked coffee there as well. Debt relief. Okay. Definite reduction or cancellation of debts of developing countries in this context. Okay. Of course, in Africa, a lot of countries have had bad governments, or maybe governments that do some good things, but also some bad things, and there's also some corruption and stuff. And maybe, well, there has been a bad government who has lent a lot of money to different parties in the West. And now there's a better government, but they still have to repay those debts, and they have to pay a lot of interest for it. But think for a moment. If a country has a lot of debt, what will this mean? What will this mean in terms of what the government can do for its citizens? What will be the consequences of this? Think about this for a minute. Pause, please. A government with less money can spend less money on health, education, infrastructure, a lot of important things. And these debts many developing countries in Africa have, they reduce the possibility to improve their country. So, please go to it's page 101. Okay, this chapter is called Finding a Voice. There you see Bono of u12. Do you know u12? Well, let's have a look. Here's u12. Yes, okay, that was u12. Their best song. What's the best song of U2? I think New Year's Day, Party Girl, or The Unforgettable Fire, or One is also beautiful. Those are the best songs of U2. Oh, and Bullet in Blue Sky. I like that one too. Yeah. Okay. Do you like U2? Well, maybe you do, maybe you don't. Okay. What is this? Is Bono, the singer of U2? What is he doing? Tell me. What do you think he's doing? And who are these guys? They are in Washington. I can tell you that, in the center of politics in the USA. Why are these guys there? And what is his message? Pause and think about this for a moment. Okay. Let's have a look at his banner. Today, 19,000 children will die as a result of international debt. Debt. Cancel the debt now. That means he really realizes that many countries of poor, many the governments of poor countries have a lot of debt, and he wants governments uh, to cancel those debts. So these governments can spend more money on things that are important. Okay, so let's go here. And then again, so if debts are relieved, then the government will have more money. But then again, there are also some people who are critical about this. And tell me, what could be the critique against debt relief, or what can be the mistake in this argument? So, you know that governments are not as good as other countries, maybe. What could be the arguments against debt relief? Pause, please, and think about that. The reasoning is that through debt relief, governments get more money and they will spend more money on education and health. However, my question is, will governments really spend more money on education and health if they receive debt relief? I don't know. Maybe they will spend it on other things, on military. Maybe they will. I don't know where they will, how they will spend it. I'm not sure if they are going to spend it in a good way. So there are different opinions about this. I'm not saying there's a right or wrong. These issues are very complex, and the only thing I can tell you that simple answers are mostly wrong. Okay, so and I don't know if this is still clear. A debt is of course a loan. So I lend you money. Someone else lends you money, and someone else lends you money, and in the end you have a lot of debt with different persons. You have to pay back that money with interest, and because you at least have to pay the interest, you won't be able to spend so much money. So debt relief can help, but at the same time there must be, it all depends on the situation. Okay, and now the next word, a grant. A grant is a sum of money given to an organization or a person for a specific person. A sentence, a grant of $10,000 has been given to Oxfam to improve sanitation in Ghana. On the picture you can see an example of that. So it's a sum of money with a specific purpose. So yes, that's what I want you to know about this. Now we're gonna do a small exercise. Please, this is a bit in a simplistic way. Don't make things too complicated here. Yes or no? Is this good or bad for fighting poverty in developing countries? Please get a piece of paper and a pen, and please just say yes or no, okay? And pause please and do this exercise. Is each of the tariff barriers good for between developing countries, good or bad? Yes. Wait, I should add one more. That's protectionism of the European Union or the USA. Okay, US of A. Pause please and do this exercise. It's just a yes or no answer for each. Okay, tariff barriers between developing countries. Bad, because trade between developing countries can benefit both countries. Of course, it depends on the context. Subsidies for farmers in the USA. Bad, because producers are not from developing countries are not able to compete, and it's not fair. It's not fair trade. Debt relief. I would say good. Depends on the good context, but the government, in theory, is able to spend more money on health and education and other important issues. Fair trade. Good. Producers receive an extra amount of money to get a fair price for their products. A quota for the amount of imported clothes of the EU. We haven't discussed quota yet, so it's actually a limited amount. I would say that's bad, because it's like a maximum amount of clothes you can import. Yes. Charity and aid. Good. I mean, in theory, the intention is probably good, but in reality, it can fail. But well, I mean, it's mixed. It's mixed. A grant for Oxfam to spend on projects that promote women's rights. I would say good. It depends on also the context. I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be effective, but it can. It depends on with which local organization is Oxfam cooperating. Is that a so it all depends on the situation. Protectionism of the European Union or the USA. Bad, because it will be harder to for developing countries to export their products to the European Union or the USA. And of course, there are a lot of consumers and there's a lot of money to be made there. Next one, find the right words. Governments of developing countries. Okay, this is an exercise. Please do this by yourself. Each is related to one of the words of this lesson, of these two YouTube lessons, because this is the second video of two videos. Just pause and then I'll tell you the answers. Number one, governments of the have to spend too much money on the loans they have. Number one, debt relief. Number two, protectionism. Number three, subsidy. Number four, fair trade. Number five, grant. 6, aid or charity. Thanks. Now we go to a small exercise on page page 109. You can see it in front of you. Please pause and try to do this exercise by yourself, and then we will discuss the answers. Please pause and do this exercise by yourself. Okay. Campaigners for urgent debt relief say that poor countries could feed their children if they didn't have to pay huge sums of money back to wealthy countries in debt repayments. The money originally borrowed in the 1970s and 80s, was often badly invested instead of being used for worthwhile projects. Repaying the debt is going to be a huge millstone around the neck of the poorest countries who should be concentrating their resources on sustainable projects. So who is this money can't afford they can't afford to pay back owed to? The debts are mainly owed to two groups: Western governments and global financial institutions, including the IMF and the World Bank. They argue that if they cancelled the debt altogether, which is not the case, it would encourage wealthy countries to be against lending and to insist on cutting aid budgets. They also insist that they shouldn't be blamed for the debt problem. But activists will never agree to stop their campaign. They insist that most wealthy governments have had to write off debts owed to them already, as they know developing countries will simply never succeed in gathering enough funds to pay off their debts. This clearly is related to debt relief. Okay. Now we're gonna wait. These are things you should think about. I have some points here. I haven't written them down yet. So, what is more important? Trade or aid? And why? Is trade always effective? Why? Let's see what other points can we think about here. Are Western countries helping in one way and doing the opposite at the same time? What is needed to improve the situation of developing countries? Okay. Debate. Of course, you're by yourself, so you can send me a mail about this. I would appreciate it. I don't think you're gonna do this. I hope so, but you can send me a mail about this. And of course, wait. Use the vocabulary in your speech. Yes, that's the goal of this lesson. So think about this, maybe write something about this. And because I think after this lesson you should be able to use the vocabulary and you should be able to answer these questions. Let's see if I... And this brings me to homework. Homework is, there is a company named Monsanto. Homework, Monsanto. Why are so many people against Monsanto? You look on Google, look on YouTube, find out why are people angry with Monsanto. Why are so many people against this company Monsanto? Please do research on this and and then we'll talk about this next lesson. Let's see if I had something more to say. Yes. Well, I did some. I had what I can say. Of course, you can think about why are poor countries poor, and some people come with simple answers. I'm very much against that because it's very complex. It's a combination of the institutions, the governmental institutions, history, conflicts of the present, conflicts of the past, uh, trade barriers. Are they able to trade? Um, social issues, culture. It's just, it's actually, it's not. It's too much even to talk about. It's too much to discuss in class. I just want you to know that it's related to a lot of things and it's very complex. And don't accept simple answers people provide sometimes. Um, Let me see. I think this is the lesson for today. So please, but don't forget, think about these issues, eh? Write me a mail or something. And yes, or wait. In the end, what do Western countries? These are the questions. Think about this, please, and I hope to see you next lesson. Thanks.